Brian, good to catch up. How are you today?
Thanks for having me.
Cool. So let's start easy. Tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Atlantic Data Forensics.
Sure. So CEO of Atlantic Data Forensics. We just celebrated our 14th anniversary here at the beginning of the year. And we do computer forensics for civil and criminal litigation for law firms, clients of law firms, not the law firms themselves. We do e-discovery, which is basically like, imagine you had to do forensics on 400 mailboxes all at once. So it's large scale kind of search and that sort of thing. And then we do that and the associated functions with incident response, data breaches, all that sort of thing. And then maybe the piece that makes us a little bit unique amongst kind of other cybersecurity sort of companies is we also testify on a regular basis in state and federal court. So all my director level and above employees testify on a 4 or 5 times a year sort of basis. Some of them, some of them do 4 or 5 times a month.
Is that would that be considered a certified expert witness?
Yeah, that's well, I don't know, certified necessarily. Is a term to apply to it, but an actual, court-tested expert witness, right?
Oh, okay. Because I was wondering if there was a certified, because I recently, I testified recently as well, but I wasn't like certified, but they said I was somebody who knew a little something or something.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that can be anything from as simple as, a deposition, which isn't necessarily simple, but, as low key as something like that to actually, courtroom time in front of a jury or panel of judges or something like that. And we also do a lot of court-martial cases. So, we're often in front of court-martial boards and so forth. So.
Cool. Sounds interesting. It sounds like you're the right person to have the conversation with today. Now, before we get down to business, we have this little tradition where we like to ask people, what's your drink of choice? And you can answer that any way that you'd like.
Oh, that's easy. Balvenie 21 Portwood, large cube, and at least, on a good day, 3 fingers worth of it.
All right. So here's the question.
Don't pour light.
Okay, so here's the question. So there's a George Thorogood cutover that happened. 1 bourbon, no scotch, 1 beer. Now Balvenie, I'm assuming that's a peated whiskey.
No, it's actually a 21-year-old scotch.
Yeah, but with scotch, some scotches. Yeah, I was just gonna say some scotches are peated heavily and some aren't, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the ones that are peated.
This is a space side one, so it's not peated, and it's finished in a port barrel.
Cool.
So it's got a little bit of that kind of sweet sort of raisiny kind of undertone that you get from a port in it, and that just happens to be my thing.
So more towards the Irish whiskey side, because I can drink the Irish whiskeys, and I love the bourbons, but
I mean, just it's older, so it's a little bit smoother maybe than the Irish is. But yeah, a little bit of that. That kind of non-peaty flavor. Now I love a good peat too, but
Yeah, like a Lafroige.
If I could only have one
nature.
for the rest of my life, it's definitely the Balvenie 21.
Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one. All right, so let's go with. So like I mentioned, when we were talking about prep for this. For the podcast is, I think forensics is one of those loosely used words, and I think it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I think that's because there's a lot more there to it than most people think. So let's talk about that. Can we define it a little bit? Think about it in terms of incident forensics, network forensics, systems, device level forensics. You talked about legal versus non-legal. Kind of give us a sense of when we talk about forensics, what are our options, and what's the right thing to be thinking about here.
Yeah, so we use it for a whole variety of things, right? So most often, probably in civil litigation, because civil litigation is the majority of the legal work in the United States, right? Folks from TV and stuff get the sense that criminal is like this really huge thing, and the number of criminal cases are actually much smaller than the number of civil cases, which are a much larger amount of things, and it really gets applied across almost every type of law out there. So I periodically run into these attorneys that will say, oh, well, we don't do any of that stuff, and I'm like, really? You don't have any clients with email or a cell phone? That's amazing, And of course, then they like, oh, we did have that one big email case. It's terrible. And I'm like, yeah.
So is this analogous to like e-discovery? The idea that there's a case or some type of litigation, you need to gather evidence off of these devices?
We do a lot of lot of forensics that doesn't involve e-discovery. So a lot of the forensic stuff is the, around what happened, when did it happen, how did it happen, right? Tell me the story of what went on this computer. Who took the files? Are the files on here? Did they send the files to somebody? Did this ever exist on here? Did they run this? Did they delete that? That sort of thing. It's all about kind of like, what's the story of what went on this particular device, whether that's a cell phone or a computer or something, things like that. Where the e-discovery stuff tends to be much larger in scale, right? Usually forensics, we're looking at a few systems, maybe a dozen at the outside or something like that. Whereas in, e-discovery, you're, like I said before, you're maybe looking at 400 mailboxes, right? But you're just doing a lot of keyword searching and deduplication of files and things like that. You're less telling a story than just pulling out everything that's responsive to a set of search terms and things like this and making them available to the attorneys.
Gotcha. So this computer level forensic stuff that you're typically involved in, that's happening usually post what I would call like network forensics. So they bring in a security firm, they start to look at this and they say, hey, it looks like some malware came in. They're looking at firewall logs or IDS logs.
Right.
They're going to target and say this particular system seems to be propagating. It looks like it came in this way. When that system's taken off network and frozen, that's when you're called in at that point in time?
So we're typically handling both sides of that. So we're typically getting the logs from, firewalls and SIMs and, whatever other devices that they've got on their network, some endpoint or something like that. And quite often times we're also identifying, here's the machines that we'd like to look at. We're going out and acquiring those machines, whether they're physical machines or VMs or cloud instances or whatever they might be, and making good decisions about what to collect versus what we don't need to collect. There's a real tendency in the industry to over collect, if you will, especially in data breach situations. Companies that come in and we're going to collect all the instances or all the computers. Well, we could do that. And you can do that pretty rapidly, and you can run up a large bill, but quite honestly, you can't analyze all that in any kind of like meaningful time frame, right? So, if you have, let's say you had, ransomware or something, which is almost like why collect it at all, but but say you had some form of malware and it was widespread through your network, right? And your endpoint logs or something told you about this. I don't need, 100 copies of that malware, right? I need, one or two samples of it so I can do some, malware analysis on it for, generate some IOCs and stuff like that. So it doesn't really make sense to collect at each and every machine. So you might end up doing partial collections, right? Maybe just the event logs from those machines or what was on those machines, things like that. So it could be a very nuanced sort of situation there, very, very fluid kind of. You got to make good, smart decisions as you're going along. What's going to give me the biggest bang for the buck? Because there's always, it's always a concern, right? How much is it going to cost?
Right. And I think most people don't understand that you can spend an awful lot of money and not get the information that you're hoping to have be there, just based on the nature of the beast. So it's I do like your approach in that, start small, focus on where you're going to get the most value. So from a value perspective, right? So you're doing this forensics on these machines. Like, what's the typical? Give me like typical examples of why you get called in, like there's a potential breach, and then real quick, the second thing is, what are the specific objectives that you have, or what are you looking for on that machine? What's the goal of what you're trying to accomplish?
So we do a lot of intellectual property theft cases and employment law cases, things like this, where you really are trying to tell a story about the computer. So your average intellectual property case is, two engineers and a sales guy, decided they could compete with their current employer, which you're totally allowed to do. You just have to walk away, leave everything behind, and then go set up your own company, right? But that's frequently people miss some of those steps in the middle about the cleanly walk away portion. So they, the 2 weeks before they decide to go, the sales guy downloads everything in the Salesforce, and the engineers grab, every contract and template document and things like this. And
all the intellectual property, any of the marketing materials. Yeah, it's amazing.
Right, and they head off and they either try and form their own competing company. Sometimes people actually form their own competing company while they're working for their employer, which is also a no-no. Don't do that. Remember, Brian said don't do that. type of thing. Or sometimes it's actually the gaining employer, right? So the person that hired them, the next place, this person shows up with slide decks and materials and client lists, and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. You weren't supposed to bring any of that stuff with you, so now you have this situation. Like, oftentimes companies do the right thing, and they will inform the previous employer, like, hey, we didn't want anything to do with this, but this individual brought a bunch of your material and so on to the situation. And in employment law cases, that's wrongful termination, sexual harassment, hostile workplace environment, things like that. We work with a lot of employers on that sort of thing. Unfortunately, there's a lot of so we call it specious claims out there. I believe that's a good term.
If I knew what specious was, I'd probably say something intelligent at this point, but
it's
without Googling it, I have no idea.
False claims.
You could just use the term false.
The story is not exactly true. So in any state in the U.S., you have about 3 years after you're terminated or left your employer, whereas you can go back and sue them for any one of a number of things or multiple things, wrongful termination, sexual harassment, hostile workplace environment, all these sort of things. Typically, what happens in those cases is an employment attorney will wait about a year. Just long enough for you to get rid of the computer and the email accounts and everything else for that former employee. And then you'll get sued, and there'll be a dozen emails that make it look like you're the devil. And most of the time, when the company then has to defend themselves against that, they're like, "Oh, geez, does anybody? Do we still have that mailbox?" And of course, you go to IT, and they're like, "Why would we have a mailbox for a person that was fired a year ago? And where's this computer?" I don't know. It's
been repurposed. Joe in accounting is using it.
It was a cast off. We reformatted it and gave it to somebody else. Whatever it is. So you'll lose a lot of that data. So we end up doing forensics on those situations too, and trying to.
I'm sorry, I mean to cut you off. Two questions there. So when somebody leaves a high value proposition position, right?
Sure.
A vice president of sales in a major organization, or
we have
someone in the CXO suite
for that.
Yeah, we typically advise our clients that, especially if it ends on a unusual way, that it's not a bad idea to actually, freeze those drives, right? So even if you want to repurpose the laptop, right? If you take that drive, right, you either directly forensically image it or you keep it, in an evidentiary way. Is that a recommendation that you make? And do you see a lot of people starting to do that now, especially with the high cost of e-discovery and you want this ability to protect yourself during litigation?
Sure. So much so that we actually have a program just for this. When I say program, I mean like a process, not a thing. It's called Safe Departure. We have a service mark on that and all that. But yeah, so it actually started with our work with a big multinational. At any given time, this multinational had about 300 employment law cases going on because they're huge, right? So it's 300 out of giant companies, not that abnormal. And what we had was a pattern developed in these things, which was they were commonly sued by people that were director level and above, right? So again, your SVP of sales and things like this. And then the other area where they were commonly sued was by people that had been terminated for cause, right? There'd been some sort of dust up and they'd been terminated. And then frequently in their most senior executive pool, the executive VP of sales or global sales or whatever it might be, they tended to get into some hard feelings when those people would leave about where they were going and customers and things like this. So there tended to be a lot of litigation around those. So we actually put together a program that we now use with HR directors and stuff all over the place, where as soon as somebody is going to be terminated, ideally before they're terminated, we just stop in, make a forensic image of their laptop. We collect up their mailbox, any network shares they have. If there's social media accounts associated with their job, we'll go ahead and pull all that material too, just so we kind of have the entirety of the collection of the data that person works with. And we store it. Nobody looks at it. Nobody does anything with it. Goes into evidence storage, gets bagged, tagged, all that sort of stuff. and gets stored away for that 3-year period. And hopefully nothing ever happens. We never
Right.
hear from them again. Everything's fine. We all go on about our business. But, we find about every 20th one.
Right. Somebody's up to no good. Yeah,
Somebody, there's a
we all have
call
those stories we could tell,
6
right?
or 8 months later, or sometimes it's as little as 3 or 4 weeks later, where they're like, oh my gosh, you still got that thing, right? You're like, yeah, we've got it all right here. And they're like, all right, because, and then they tell us some crazy story.
So it's so funny you should say that, because I mentioned earlier that I had once been an expert witness in a case, and the case was exactly that. It was a vice president of sales, drained the sales force, took all of the intellectual property, all the marketing materials, and went elsewhere. Went to a key competitor, and it was interesting because they had all of the forensic information. Someone like yourself had done all that work for them, and our role was to show that they had done such a poor job of protecting the information that it really was like, so literally there was 50 Salesforce administrators with full access to the entire sales, worldwide global database. So
right.
It is an interesting thing. So interesting stuff. So where is the potential value props? Like someone listening to this, they're just running a small to medium sized enterprise, where would it be potentially valuable for them to, when would it be potentially valuable for them to engage a forensic person?
I mean, ideally, nowadays, you want to know me in advance. Because 50% of the time it's going to be litigation type stuff. If you're in business for any period of time, there's no way of avoiding it, right? Sooner or later it's going to happen. But the other 50% of the time, it's going to be some sort of data breach or third-party data breach or whatever that ends up affecting you, and things like that. So it's good to know, a computer forensics incident response provider ahead of time. More importantly, it's important to bring us on board with your insurance carrier. As more and more people are starting to have cybersecurity insurance, that'll take care of a lot of these sort of problems. Also, D&O and error and omission insurance and stuff like this will cover for some of these investigations, things like this. So it's a matter of just going, okay, well, we know Atlantic Data Forensics, and they're going to be our chosen provider. And while there's nobody's hair is on fire and there's no incidents going on or anything else, letting them know, hey, if, we're going to use these folks in the future. If there is a problem, we've talked to them. Here's their rates, all that sort of stuff, and we worked out. Sure, so that you're just sort of prepared. And when it makes sense, what you should do. Like I said, for folks that are doing safe departure with us, right? The HR department knows about it, the IT department knows about it, and it just becomes a standard thing they do. It's just a standard part of somebody leaving the company,
right?
Things like that. So it's just you just work into the normal process. The other things, those are kind of a one-off thing, right? I mean, the subpoena shows up in the mail or, delivered. I mean,
no, please.
That's the first you know
I'd
about
I'd rather not talk about that.
Right, or the FBI knocks on your door and is like, hey, we'd like to look at a couple of things, it happens.
Yeah, I'm going to call the attorney before I call you at that point, but I'm going to call you second.
Right.
I hope you don't mind that.
No, but I mean, it's good to have that, prior relationship with us because, obviously, in all those scenarios, we can help protect the company.
Yep.
Which is, is the goal.
Yeah. So I agree completely. We usually, when we write an incident response plan, we're trying to get all of that information into there.
Oh, yeah.
We would like, look, you need to know who your attorney is or who your attorney is going to be, in the event of a breach or a breach notification, something of that nature, who your forensic partner is going to be. And I do like what you said about the cyber liability insurance company, because some of them play hard and fast with this concept of authorized response agents. And if they're not either an authorized response agent or they haven't been approved, and they start the investigation, they can that can technically obviate the coverage. And I've actually had a client have that happen, where they did their own investigation and the cyber liability insurance didn't cover the cost.
Yep. No, I've been there on that. We work hard with all the insurers to stay on their panels, and I wish it was a much more organized process, but unfortunately it's not. But like I said, if you go to your carrier or your broker, when there's nothing going on, and go, hey, we have a relationship. These are the people we'd like to use. We're comfortable with them. We've talked to them, and all that sort of stuff in advance, and you provide, our information, names, and all that sort of stuff, and the rates. they're usually very accommodating. Oh, well, you know somebody, you want to use them, they're near you,
Yeah,
they fit into
yeah,
our
that's
rate
been my
structure.
experience. Yeah,
Great, that sounds wonderful. They have the
right,
necessary experience to do this. Let's,
right.
you
It's a
know,
quals thing. If they see the quals, if they see your this is what you do. I haven't had any
right,
problem having anyone get anybody sort of approved through that process.
exactly. And I said it's a constant challenge though for a forensics and
Well,
incident
we're in
response
information security. Would you expect
to,
anything less than a constant challenge? I
to
mean,
just
isn't that the definition of this field?
stay with the carrier. I feel like they ought to give us a letter that just says, "Remember, you certified us," but they
Yeah,
don't. It's a
I
little
hear you.
less organized than that.
All right, so you've seen a lot of crap in your day, right? Like us, you get called into incidents. So and think about this. You can analogize it to a fictional character or a real character. Who would make either an absolutely amazing or horrible CISO, and why? Knowing what you know. So,
Yeah.
someone told me Elon Musk recently because he was so open-minded. What would
Uh,
be your answer for that?
you know, um, it's weird because I have CISOs that are all over the map. Um,
I think that goes without
well,
saying.
meaning that there's no, I don't think there's any one perfect way to run an organization, right? What fits for your organization doesn't fit for the next organization and stuff like that. Um, unfortunately, folks think that well, company has huge revenues, so obviously they're super secure and stuff like that, which is not the case. Don't care how many billions of dollars you make, you didn't get that way, without through organic growth. You probably acquired hundreds of companies to get there, and that causes problems. Um, so, so that's an interesting question because I have some CISOs that I work with. They're very organized, compliance oriented, checking the boxes, using lots of frameworks, sort of thing, and that's how they manage their operations, and it's successful. I have others that are, I would say, come up out of the more SOC technical background environment. So they tend to focus on, their specific control sets and things like this.
Yeah. So those are going to follow. So it's so funny because I can see the same people in my world, right? You're dealing with the people that come at it from the ISO 27001 COVID side, or you
Right,
got the people that come in from the CIS critical security controls, right? The super
right.
techie guys, and then you got the last one that I hope we'll both agree is the worst CISO is the product collector. Like when you ask him what his information security strategy is, he tells you his product strategy.
Oh,
Okay,
uh,
so we're on the same page there.
yeah, we just handled a large breach during the holidays, and it was just, again, multi-billion-dollar company, hundreds of thousands of employees, every product under the sun, none of them properly installed, none of them properly managed,
None of them
and
properly
an IT
maintained,
staff that
inadequate
was,
training on each of them,
uh,
not enough people to operate all the
yeah,
tools.
an IT staff that was a fraction of what it should have
Yep.
been for a company that size, managed by, frankly, a CISO that thought he knew a lot more than what he actually did. I mean, there's plenty of stories out there about, CISOs that are utterly unqualified for their jobs and, somehow rose up in the company just by virtue of being there, I guess, or knowing so. I don't know how that happens,
I
but
mean, we are whatever the number is, 1.7 or 3 million people short, right, depending upon which study you see. So you're
right,
going to have, right. And I love the old line. Anytime you go to a doctor, I mean, I'm always reminded that 50% of the doctors graduate in the bottom half of their class.
right.
Same thing for a CISO, right?
Hmm.
So last question for you. So based on, you and I, same kind of people, we're having everyday conversations, right? And this podcast is listened to by both some technical people and some people that are more on the business side that are, trying to become good governance people, right? Good people to
Sure.
manage that risk. What would be an interesting topic or two you might think of for another episode? Things that you see people struggling with, questions that you're being consistently asked.
So So the two biggest pain points I have right now with companies, maybe it's three.
If you think long enough, it'll become 4.
It's definitely no more than 3. So lots of companies talking about two-factor or multi-factor authentication. Much fewer companies actually implementing it than needs to be done, and that just that eliminates everything from the danger of phishing to account takeover to it just has so many excellent benefits. And unfortunately, I talk to CISOs out there that are, oh, we can't do that here. It's just way too complicated, and our environment's too unique. And it's like, no, you're not. You're just running computers like everybody else.
Agree. And anyone who's in cloud, if you're using Office 365 and you are not using multi-factor authentication, especially on the administrative level logins, you are in trouble. Right.
Well, and the things we commonly
you'll be meeting Brian.
Yeah, I mean,
you'll be meeting Brian eventually.
Get my number. Yeah. So and the common thing we hear is well, it's we're so large it'd be too hard, or we have so many lazy guys it'd be so hard. It isn't. And then the idea that like, oh, the user base will never accept this. I actually had CISO recently tell me that oh, the IT department will fight me on this. And I was like, oh, the IT department? I was like, well, I would pick 2 of them, fire them, and make an example of those 2, and everybody else will get on board. But yeah, so you get all these weird things, and the reality is people are much more accepting of a multi-factor, two-factor authentication environment now because they're experiencing it at their bank, they're experiencing it on Facebook and Gmail, and
I think
there's gaming sites now that require it. Like you can't be on our site unless so it's just becoming a more standard thing. So that right there would take care of a ton of things. Logs. Nobody has logs. Nobody has logs. And I don't care if people are doing it. You don't need to buy some fancy SIM and all that. I mean, if you got the money to do it, please do. That's awesome. I love you for it.
Splunk is great. ArcSight's
great.
But
if you're just
use Graylog or Kiwi, right? I mean, anything. Give me
dumping
something.
it into anything that'll collect some logs, and I don't even care if you look at it. I mean, I don't care if you run thread into blah blah. Just let it sit there and never look at it, but you have it. Right. It's better than not being able to tell at all. And then the last thing is kind of weird. GeoIP fencing or blocking for a lot of companies. So many intrusions could be prevented by simply enabling those little bits of rules in your firewall that say, hey, I don't really need data from China or Russia, or I do no business in South America, so I just don't need to accept packets from there, inbound or outbound, right? Well, that prevents just a whole lot of things from being successful on people's networks. So.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. It's funny you should say that because I think geo-gating is one of those things that people just don't. And we literally just went through this exercise in a law firm we act as the VC sub for. Mm-hmm. And we it was great because their firewall allowed you to break it down. Actually, it was Mimecast, allowed you to break it down by individual country.
Yeah.
And it was so cool. What we just did was we just said, okay, let's just start with Gavadude network in France. Let's start with Bulgaria. Let's start with the Russian Balkan areas that are known for hacking. And we literally just every week we would turn off 2, and we would just monitor complaints. And literally, I think we were able to get down to we were able to cross off like 140 strange countries.
Oh, I know. When you actually look at your whitelist afterward, you go, oh, I have like 14, maybe 16 countries total that I accept packets from. And it's not like it's going to prevent every attack ever. No. It's just reducing the attack surface by so much.
Right.
And it's it's just the freest, easiest thing you could possibly do.
Right. The other thing I like too is that I like increasing. I'm an engineer by trade, right? So you like higher signal to noise, and really what you're doing is you're pushing 50-60% of the noise off. So if there is signal, the chance that you're going to catch it is going to be a hell of a lot higher.
Yep.
So all 3 good ideas. Actually, 2 of them are already on the calendar, and we'll add the last one. So before we say farewell, how can folks who might want to get in touch with you get in touch? What's the best way to do that?
Well, you can call our main office number, which is 410-540-9000. And you can leave your name there, and we'll get right back to you. We also have an emergency after hours number that you can get to right there. So if you got one of those, oh my God, my hair's on fire sort of thing. You'll be able to get to that right there by clicking on that. And then of course our website's Atlantic DF for digital forensics, AtlanticDF.com. And you can reach us through that, and
Cool.
email us, and everybody, we don't hide. We're easy to find.
I've never had a hard time getting in touch with you.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. Well, Brian, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on and kind of sharing your thoughts on forensics. I know this is going to be helpful for the folks that are listening. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Talk to you soon, Brian.
Have a good one.